In this video I will show you how to replace the water pump on 2006 to 2017 GMC Acadia SUVs. Step number 1. Park the vehicle on a flat surface, set the emergency brake and place blocks in front of and behind the rear wheels for safety. 2. Open the passenger side rear door, slide the rear seat all the way back, rotate the lock holding the mat to the floor of the truck in a counterclockwise motion. Once free, remove the mat. 3. Remove the cover that sits over the battery access panel by simply lifting it up with your hands as shown in the image. 4. Now remove the screw holding the battery access panel in place using a number 20 Torx screwdriver. Once the screw is removed, proceed to remove the cover. 5. Disconnect the negative battery terminal using a ratchet and a 10mm socket. 6. Open the engine compartment and remove the engine oil filler cap by turning it in a counterclockwise motion. 7. Next, remove the plastic engine cover by pulling it up with your hands. 8. Once the engine cover is removed, install the oil cap in its original position to prevent any object or tool from accidentally falling inside the engine. 9. Remove the plastic retainers shown on the screen using a tool made for this purpose, or using a small flat screwdriver or a hook as shown in the image. Lift the center section first, and then remove the clips completely by pulling them out with your hand. 10. Wait for the engine temperature to cool down, and remove the radiator cap by pressing slightly inwards and turning the cap in a counterclockwise motion at the same time. 11. Place a container under the vehicle on the driver's side to collect the coolant. 12. Most of these vehicles don't have a radiator drain valve, so it will be necessary to disconnect the lower radiator hose by sliding the clamp back using adjustable pliers as shown in the image. 13. Next, disconnect the lower radiator hose by pulling it outwards with your hand and place the container underneath as mentioned earlier to collect the engine coolant. 14. Remove the bolts that hold the engine coolant reservoir as well as the bolt holding the air conditioning line clamp using a ratchet and a 10mm socket. Once the bolts are removed, place the coolant reservoir on its side as shown in the image. 15. Lift back the red positive cable cover shown on the screen and remove the nut using a ratchet and a 10mm socket. Once the nut is removed, disconnect the terminals by simply pulling them up with your hand. 16. Next, remove the fuse box cover by applying inward pressure on the latches and pulling the cover up at the same time. 17. Detach the fuse box from its base by applying inward pressure on the 4 latches holding it in place using a small pry bar or flathead screwdriver and pull the fuse box up to release it. 18. Move the fuse box to the side and proceed to disconnect the wires by applying inward pressure on the connector latch and simultaneously pulling backwards to release it as shown in the image. 19. Remove the bolt holding the negative cable to the firewall using a ratchet and a 10mm socket. 20. Disconnect the wire connector shown on the image by pressing inward on the connector latch and pulling outward at the same time to release it. 21. Detach the connector shown on the screen from the base of the fuse box by prying upward with a small pry bar or flathead screwdriver. 22. Remove the nuts holding the metal base of the fuse box in place using a ratchet and a 10mm socket. Once they are removed, proceed to remove the metal plate by simply pulling it outward with your hands. 23. Remove the 2 bolts holding the engine mount shown in the image using a ratchet and a 15mm socket. Once the bolts are removed, proceed to remove the bracket by simply moving it and pulling it out with your hands. 24. Next, remove the bolts holding the bracket shown on the screen using a ratchet and an 18mm socket. Once the bolts have been removed, proceed to remove the bracket by simply pulling it out with your hands. 25. Slide the upper radiator hose clamp shown on the screen back using adjustable pliers. 26. Disconnect the hose by pulling it back with your hands and place a container under the engine to collect the antifreeze. 27. Next, loosen the water pump pulley bolts without removing them completely using a ratchet and a 10mm socket. 28. Next, ensure that the belt routing diagram sticker is still present. If the sticker is gone, draw the belt routing on a piece of paper and proceed to release the serpentine belt tension by moving the belt tensioner away from the belt using a serpentine belt removal tool similar to the one shown on the screen and proceed to remove the belt with your other hand. 29. Once the belt is removed, remove the water pump pulley bolts completely and remove the pulley. 30. Next, remove the 6 bolts holding the water pump using a ratchet and a 10 mm socket as shown in the image. 31. Once the bolts have been removed, proceed to remove the water pump by prying it out with a pry bar or hitting it with a rubber mallet to detach it from the engine. 32. Once the old water pump is removed, thoroughly clean the surface where the pump sits using a towel and remove all the old gasket material using a scraper as shown in the image. 33. Apply a thin layer of gasket-making silicone over the perimeter where the gasket sits on the new water pump and install the corresponding gasket on the pump. Next, apply a small even layer over the base where the water pump sits on the engine to ensure a better seal and prevent leaks. 34. Install the new water pump in its original position and install the corresponding bolts that fasten the water pump to the engine. 35. Tighten the water pump bolts in 2 stages and in a crisscross fashion. In the first stage, snug them firmly, and, in the second stage, tighten them fully according to the specifications described in the owner's manual. 36. Install the water pump pulley in its original position and tighten the screws by hand for the moment. 37. Install the new serpentine belt following the belt routing diagram. 38. Once the belt is installed, tighten the water pump pulley bolts completely according to the specifications described in the owner's manual. 39. Install the remaining components in their original position in the reverse order in which they were removed, ensuring that all bolts are tightened according to the specifications described in the owner's manual, as well as all electrical connections are securely connected. 40. Make sure to reinstall the lower radiator hose and its respective clamp in its original position. 41. Add the type of antifreeze recommended in your owner's manual to the radiator slowly, waiting for air bubbles to come out as you fill it completely. Check the level in the reservoir and add antifreeze accordingly. 42. Install the radiator cap and tighten it firmly. 43. Connect the negative battery terminal and tighten it firmly. 44. Start the engine, verify that there are no coolant leaks present and pay close attention to the engine coolant temperature gauge to ensure that it doesn't go past half. If it does, turn the engine off. Allow the engine to cool down and add more coolant as needed. Start the engine again and verify that there are no leaks and that everything is working properly. 45. Turn the engine off. Wait for it to cool down and check the coolant level in the radiator and the coolant reservoir one more time. Add more coolant if needed. 46. Once you have filled the radiator with antifreeze again, install the radiator cap back on and tighten it all the way. 47. Install the battery covers back on. 48. Take the vehicle for a test drive to ensure that the engine operates at normal temperature while driving. Upon return, check the coolant level in the overflow reservoir, add more coolant if necessary. That's how simple it is to replace the water pump on 2006 to 2017 GMC Acadia SUVs.